So there's a couple more functions that I want to talk through. The first one, or before we get to that, actually, I want to point something out. Okay, some functions are what I would call do something functions, functions that do something, like print. Print something out. It does something. Functions can also return something. I'm going to teach you about input here in just a second, but type was another one of those return something functions. In other words, it sends something back to the program, but it doesn't necessarily do anything visible or invisible in the program. A function can be one or the other of these. It has to be at least one of those, or else it's kind of a pointless function. If it neither does something nor returns something, you just wasted a bunch of code. If you want, you can write a function, or in some cases, the built-in Python functions both do something and return something. So we will write our own functions as we get into this class sooner rather than later. But input is a function that you'll be using for many of the programs early on in the class to gather input from your users. So let's talk about input, because people get confused really quickly about this. Input has one parameter. The parameter for input, the thing that you put in between the parentheses, is what I would call the prompt, or what you might want to call what's the question you want to ask the user. So if you're using input to gather the user's age, then the prompt is probably going to be something like, what is your age, or how old are you? Input will wait for the user to enter something and press the enter key. They'll wait for the user to type something and press the enter key, at which time whatever they type will be returned. It's a return something that will be returned to the program. So you want to capture whatever the user types in a variable. Let me show you. And I would use a variable name to capture what they're inputting that makes sense based on what you're trying to get from them. So if I wanted to ask the user their name, I would use this function. Now, what I've seen a lot of folks do in this scenario is they get confused and they think that whatever they type in the parentheses is going to become the value of this variable. It's not. That's just what appears on the screen for the user to type their name. So I'm going to print this out. Okay. Name is str name. Okay, so you see what I'm doing here. I'm asking the user what their name is. Whatever the user types in gets put in this variable called str name. And then we're printing it out. Your name is, and then another object, which is the value of that variable. Yes?
For that first line, it says that input, that would be that input is the response to that question.
Yes, that's what the input returns. So let's run this and let's see how it works. Okay, so it says, what is your name? You can see that it's paused here. You know the program has stopped executing because it doesn't have that little stuff at the end saying error code 0. So if I click here and I type Bill and I hit enter, now it prints out your name is Bill. So the prompt is what was in the input's prompt parameter, which is what goes in the parentheses. What I typed is what got put into str name and then printed out. Everybody following that? Feel like We're all good? Okay. So that is how input works. And input is a very simple, that's all it does, but it's a really simple way to get input from your user. Most of our programs for the early part of this class are going to be command line programs like this. It's not until we hit the bonus material of the class where we're going to be popping up windows and buttons and that kind of thing. So we're going to get used to interacting with users on a very simple level. Now, there's one more thing that I want to point out about input. No matter what the user types, whether it's a name or digits or decimals, it is always a string. Okay? So let me just show you what I mean. Age. I'm going to change that to age. And we're going to print the type. I won't change the variable name, but actually I'm going to, because inevitably I'll be sad because it'll confuse somebody. str age. Okay? So all I'm going to do is, it'll ask me what my age is. I'm going to type my age, 77. And look, I typed 77 and it hit str because it's a string. So what it's printing out is not this, okay? What it's printing out is this. Huge difference. That's a string containing 77. It is not the number 77. You think I can do that? Seems like you could, right? Let's see. Uh-oh, right? Because it's still a string. We can't do that. So here's the moral of the story. We're going to do programs where you're going to ask users to input a number, and then you want to do something with that number. So before you do that, before you add that number to something or do math with that number, you need to make sure that you convert that number to an int or a float. Yes? Yeah, well, you need branching for those. Yeah, you would use if statements, which we're going to get to those in just not like a few, like 2 weeks maybe max. Yeah, actually, if you look ahead to the assignment for Module 2, which we're going to this is the first of 2 lectures on Module 2, so don't panic about the assignment right now. But the Module 2 assignment is to do a Mad Libs. Anybody remember Mad Libs from like grade school? So we're actually going to take several words of input from users and inject those into strings. And we'll use a method called formatted strings, which is a really elegant way of doing things. So that brings me to the Sandbox challenge, or this is a non-credit. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but here's a good practice. Okay, so I'm a lot of these weeks or lectures when I don't have an assignment to give you that lecture, I'm going to give you a Sandbox challenge that'll test you and help you work on some of these things. So your challenge is to ask someone their name and their age and then print it out in a sentence. It's very similar to what I just did, but now we're talking about multiple variables. We're talking about them entering an age and a name. And if you want to expand on that, you can. But just 2 variables, and then you put it all together in a cohesive sentence, like your name is Bill and you are 36 years old or whatever. Okay? So that's the Sandbox challenge. I would recommend spending some time working on that. If you haven't finished A1 and uploaded that, definitely do that before you walk out the door today. Because remember, Sunday is a hard deadline for that. I'll drop you if you don't have that. I'll just take it as a sign that you don't plan to continue with the class. So make sure that you upload that and do that work today. Also, I think if you remember last time in this class, I had an AirPod casualty, so the lecture video didn't come out right, but I did get great video on Tuesday yesterday. Gosh, it seems longer ago than that. I got great video yesterday, and that's all on the website now. So if you need to review some of that stuff, like how to upload the file into Canvas or how to do A1, that's all in there in a lot of detail. So you can do that. You can work on the Sandbox challenge. If you've done all that, you're good to go. Then I'm done for the day. So I will see you next Monday.